has this weekend revealed that you've got France that are so way out in front of everyone else?
We had thought that maybe England were further forward in their development than they are.
I think they should win the Grand Slam, but I think we shouldn't yet suggest that they will win convincingly at Murrayfield, let alone that final round against England. Saturday
was defining for me in relation to, I just thought, no, Sam, you've got to go away and if it is confidence, you've got to try and get that confidence back.
Have we seen anything from Wales in terms of evidence to suggest that they can get a win in this Six Nations? Hello, this is The Ruck, the journalists' rugby podcast from The Times and The Sunday Times, coming to you after round 2 of the Six Nations over the weekend. As always, loads to get into, and as always, back in studio. I'm Alfie Reynolds, with me in the building, Charlie Morgan once again. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, pal. Thanks for having me.
No, you don't need to say thank you. Always a pleasure, Charlie. Fresh from a trip to Edinburgh. We were both up there for the Calcutta Cup. A man that was in Cardiff for the Wales-France game is Elgan Alderman. All right, Elgan?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Loads to unpick. There's always loads to unpick. We know that. And also, down the line with us today, back on the Ruck actually for the first time in a long, long time. Delighted to say that David Walsh is with us. Hi, David.
Hi, Alfie.
Look, lads, there's so much to try and unpick, I think, from any round in the Six Nations. I guess a really general one, first of all. What impact did the weekend have on the championship? And this links to a question that Will Kelleher posed from the stands at Murrayfield in the podcast we did post-match after Scotland's win, was, has this weekend revealed that you've got France that are so way out in front of everyone else, Wales that are way down the bottom, and then you've got those 4 middle teams that actually are really densely packed together?
I think France certainly looks strong. I've always fancied that England will go there on the final day with a plan. We now know what heights Scotland can kind of raise themselves to. So them having France at home means I certainly think that there's a hell of a lot on that game and potential for Scotland to kick on. I think if I was going to take one lesson, it's potentially that this is a really kind of well-worn boxing kind of cliche, but the styles make fights thing, the fact that Scotland can just so continually put together a game plan that gives England so many issues, it's just a really interesting wrinkle of this championship. And and I'd package that in with how impressed I was with Italy again, actually. Yeah, those two things.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway from last weekend was that it was a great weekend for the neutral, because you had Italy really giving Ireland a go in a way that we haven't seen them do in Dublin for almost 30 years, since before the Six Nations era. You had that Calcutta Cup match with Scotland winning. I know a lot of people didn't predict that they would win, but there was always this inherent sense that they might just pull something out of the bag after losing in Rome. And then Sunday was a very different joy for the neutral. Obviously, it was just another galling defeat for Wales, but I think there was a lot of talk about value for money in the stadium on Sunday, but if you just loved watching rugby, then watching that France team play like that, where the best bet of Wales getting back into the game looked like if France ran so much they tired themselves out and they couldn't move anymore.
As in the chat in the stadium was people saying this isn't value for money?
Well, just beforehand, because of the tickets, it was the lowest Six Nations crowd in Cardiff other than a COVID game, so it was just under 80% full. But if they were marketing tickets, they should have just said, this is your chance to see Antoine Dupont and Mathieu Jalibert and a potential France Grand Slam winning team. I think we think of this France team as having underperformed. They've won 18 of their past 22 Six Nations matches, which shows how much potential they have, because 18 wins out of 22, and it feels like they haven't performed as well as they should have. Currently, they are performing in Grand Slam form, so we'll see what the next 3 weekends have in store.
Yeah, David, what did you make of it? We spoke very briefly in the press conference room at Murrayfield after the game, and you quickly said, well, we've had a great day, particularly with the match between Ireland and Italy as well. What are your thoughts overall on round 2 and where it leaves this year's Six Nations?
The thing that strikes me about the championship so far, it's like it's been a reaffirmation of what makes this championship so popular amongst rugby enthusiasts, and I would say even sports enthusiasts. I imagine there are lots and lots of people who only watch the Six Nations. That's the only rugby they see. At the beginning of the tournament, there really was a sense that the way the fixtures were lined up, we were going to have an England-France game in Paris potentially for the Grand Slam, and a lot of people were looking forward to that. And if it had played out like that, we would have all have said wonderful. But it's actually even more wonderful that it's not set in stone, that Scotland can come out and do what they did. And for me, what they did was that they reminded us that they still remain a very decent team, especially at Murrayfield. But I also thought that it was a check on our kind of presumptions about the England team, because of the team had won 12 consecutive games, had beaten New Zealand very convincingly after giving them a 12-point start at Twickenham almost, had beaten Australia very convincingly, and had beaten France last year at Twickenham. We had thought that maybe England were further forward in their development than they are. What Scotland did was to say, hold on, guys, have another look at England, and maybe you will come back with a more realistic view of where they're at now. I thought it was a real kind of a wake-up call is a bit harsh, but it was a kind of a reminder to us to look at our assumptions about England and ask again. Having said that, England will go to Paris, and France may well be going for a Grand Slam if they can survive Murrayfield and beat Italy this weekend. But I wouldn't, for a second, think that England go there without a chance. If for that last game, I would regard England as having a really decent chance of beating France. And I think the last thing I'd like to say about the Six Nations so far is that what France have done has been really refreshing. The way they're playing rugby now, it's almost like they've said, we're not that interested in beating people up anymore, overpowering them physically. We want to play rugby. We want to have people on the pitch who want to run with the ball in their hands. And we want to play the kind of rugby that is very attractive to watch. And I would argue that kind of rugby that France are playing gives, if it could be adopted worldwide, would give rugby a much better chance in the medium to the long term.
I mean, there's a lot with the France thing. I suppose the counter argument to kind of parts of what we've been saying would be: are we in danger of a Six Nations where France just run away with it? And maybe actually this weekend is, if anything, it's taught us that you expect England to rock up in Murrayfield and win for the first time in ages, and they don't. Italy almost are able to do the job over Ireland. The reason we love this competition, as you've all said, is because of the unpredictability, because every year it throws up these kind of different storylines. But is there a danger that this France team, I mean, Elgan, you watched them on Sunday, admittedly, against Wales, who we know are down the bottom of the pile at the moment, but are they just too good for everyone else? Is the gap too wide?
I think they should win the Grand Slam, but I think we shouldn't yet suggest that they will win convincingly at Murrayfield, let alone that final round against England. I think in our pre-match predictions where we went up against AI, I think I suggested that I don't think they would get a 4-try bonus point at Murrayfield, and that it might be a bit of a dogfight. Now, the way they've been playing, maybe we should suggest that they should absolutely be getting 4 tries every time they play. But I think what history shows us is that I remember in 2021 when Wales almost won that Grand Slam that was referred to as the Grand Jam, because how jammily they look like they might do it. As if a suggestion that only fitting Grand Slams are when they wipe the floor with everyone. But history shows us, I think there's been maybe one Grand Slam in the entire history of this competition where a team has comprehensively beaten everyone in every round. I think it might have been England in the early 90s, where if there had been bonus points in play, they basically would have got 5 and the other team would have got 0 in every game. Or they might have missed out on a 4-try bonus point in one game. There's basically never been really a Grand Slam where a team has wiped the floor with absolutely everyone. So if France did do that, I think it would actually be the most comprehensive Grand Slam in history, essentially. But still 3 rounds to go, and those last 2 weekends in particular. I mean, we shouldn't be writing off Italy and Lille yet, because 2 years ago it was a 13-all draw in that fixture and they had a penalty to win. So, we shouldn't be handing them the Grand Slam just yet, but they certainly should be. I think anything other than that, and France will view that as under-delivering.
I think it was really interesting distinction that David made on England, which is that it's a check for our expectations of it. I think it's really important to say that they have said all along, Richard Wigglesworth has labelled the point that, look, when we were losing these tight games, we weren't as bad as people said. Now we're winning. And he said this before the Wales game when they're on that streak of 11. He said, we are very aware that we're not the finished article. And I think for that reason, losing at Murrayfield and the manner in which they did, I was in the captain's run on the Friday, and Ben Earl did the press afterwards, and he said, we have looked at previous games against Scotland and we have gone, we were outthought there. That's where they sort of outmaneuvered us, and their strategy was just sharper than us. I think for that to happen again, now that they have the sort of level of self-awareness, can really be a jolt for them, and quite an important jolt.
Yeah, but that's maybe the frustration though with the England defeat, right? And again, I think I said this in the pod on Saturday night, that I went to Murrayfield thinking England could lose this game. Like, Scotland are good enough to beat England. They have a very good record against them. They're a very good team, all of that stuff. But I thought it would be close. I didn't necessarily expect the manner of that England performance. And it was kind of the demons of Calcutta Cup's past were coming back to haunt them, weren't they? I mean, as Charlie says there, David, you mentioned that it's maybe made us reassess kind of where England are off the back of seeing them at Murrayfield. What's your assessment of this England team at the moment?
I mean, I am a fan of what Steve Borthwick has done up to now. I think England are a very decent team. They remain a very decent team, but maybe not quite the team we thought they were. I had a real kind of moment of, wow, I didn't expect to see that in the moment that Finn Russell and Sione Tuipulotu threw those long passes that ended with Jamie Ritchie having a walk in try. I think when the pass was going to Ritchie, there wasn't an England player within 50 meters of him. And I thought, wow, how can England get so exposed? And I thought that was a bit jolting, jarring. And I also felt that in the whatever it was, 12 phases of play before the kind of, ill-fated attempt at a drop goal, I thought the England attack had kind of run itself out. It was like a heavyweight contest where both fighters are in the middle of the ring, but the guy throwing the punches is the guy who's going to run out of steam. And when you consider that George Ford had been clearing a ruck 11 seconds before he tried the drop goal, you thought, this is chaos. This actually is really the kind of play that a backs coach would lose his life over and say, how could that be? I mean, you see a team going for a drop goal, and it was a relatively, easy block down for Matt Fagerson. And then if you went back, England, it was going to be really difficult, whatever it was at that point, 31 points to 14 or 13. But it was only 53 minutes into the game. But when the try was scored, Finn Russell goes down to take the conversion. And if you look at this on the video now, it's alarming to see how long it took England's players to get back behind their own goal line. I mean, Russell is there with the ball and he's got it placed, and he's waiting for the England players to get there. And he's got a look on his face that says, boys, any chance you could speed up a little bit here? And I thought that was kind of just alarming, that you'd imagine everybody wants to get back there because this game isn't over. But actually it was. England stopped believing at that point. They had a long series of attacks straight after, from the kickoff. But they did exactly the same as they had done before the drop goal. The attack just petered out for lack of impact. And, that's something that I'm sure a lot of people in the brains trust behind the team will be thinking a lot about this week.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? And I'm not looking to absolutely hammer England at all. I think, you're all bang on in the sense that it's a bit of a reality check. I think what Richard Wigglesworth was saying, Charlie, is very smart in the way you should approach it. That, you know, they're not as good as they were when they're on that streak. You're not as bad as you are when you lose. But everything that David has outlined there is, to me, why I've been really struggling to kind of unpick this England defeat, because there were so many elements that I think themselves, and Steve Borthwick's not the sort of coach that is going to come out and hammer his players, and that's absolutely fine, but I think drops so far below the standards that they themselves have set for them.
Yeah, jarring was the word David used, and that's bang on, because it really felt like that. It felt a significant setback, and it was their largest margin of defeat, I think, since that gruesome World Cup warm-up game that they had in Dublin, when
don't remind us
whether that was the sort of narrative after that was that we've been flogging ourselves in fitness stuff, and that's why we look so leggy. But they do get themselves into really odd positions against Scotland because they get outmaneuvered so consistently. And a shout out to Paul Edison, who reminded me of this and made this parallel. The Ellis Genge being in the backfield, if you're blaming a loosehead prop for a mistake in the backfield from a kick through, you're missing a lot of stuff that's gone on to that point, which has put them in such a compromising position in it. But actually, there are loads of parallels with how England have managed to get in those sorts of those desperate situations against Scotland before. Luke Cowan-Dickey knocking a cross kick into touch in 2022, similar thing. The Ritchie try that David mentions. Scotland they've got a line out to go a 14-man team, and they just flood runners. It's actually a Lee Blackett strike move that they use, which is really smart, with Ben White looping around the sort of first kind of screen player midfield. But they flood runners towards the right edge, and then England sort of honeypot a little bit, but they're sort of going to do that because they're so desperate, and they're understaffed anyway. They do make that first tackle, but yeah, then it's a walk in, and Tuipulotu's pass was lovely. There are loads of examples about that around, throughout the game, and it just shows how smart Scotland were and how they continue to be against England. And I mentioned a little bit about this frustration that their fans have last week with Slotty. Their ceiling is high as a side. That was so apparent. And before this championship, I did keep having in the back of my head, I fancied Scotland to do well, and I had in the back of my head what Gregor Townsend said after the Argentina game, that he said, look, you've got to please recognise that the best stuff we're putting out in these autumn games has been as good as anything that I've seen since I've been head coach over a long period now. But it's that consistency, and fans are sort of right to say, well, show us that again. And I think Scotland's championship now is clearly, can they back that up against at home against France, and can they finally go to Ireland and at least replicate some of what they've done against England over a long period of the game.
It's so fascinating. David, I just wanted to ask you as well, actually. The last time that we had you on was a while ago. It was just after you'd spent some time in England's camp. Steve Borthwick welcomed you in, and you spent a prolonged period with the team. That was when things weren't going well. What have you made of their rise since then, and where they now find themselves?
I think they've done really well since then. I mean, I was with them in the days before England went to Dublin. They went from Girona directly to Dublin, and they lost in Dublin. And two or three of the England guys kind of, when I was having conversations with them, suggested to me, now very gently, that they felt Ireland might be on the wane, which I believe is absolutely true. But it's the kind of thought that the England players shouldn't have had. They should have had a view that this Ireland team is still, relatively speaking, formidable, and going to Dublin was going to really put England under their colours to win. As it turned out, they got well beaten on the day, but they picked up from that. And then you go to Murrayfield. But as I've said earlier, I just think it was the kind of bump on the road that every team is going to have. England have had it, and what determines the success or otherwise of this team is how they react to that. I was reminded of one thing when I was considering, the game England have at Twickenham against Ireland this weekend. Go back 2 years ago when England had that good win with Morgan Smith's drop goal in the last minute. How did that game open in terms of what was the first big moment of that game? It was Ireland kicking the ball long and George Furbank running it back, and England scoring a really good try. And England aren't doing that anymore. So I think, the great cliche that we keep hearing from players is learnings. And I think England would have learned a hell of a lot from Saturday.
Yeah, and certainly what it does is put pressure on to the rest of England's matches. I think they're totally capable of winning those matches, but all of a sudden it throws up a bit of a different narrative or expectations, pressure on this team. We'll get on to their match with Ireland this weekend in just a moment. Before that, let's speak about those other two games. Elgan, we've mentioned it already, but Wales-France in Cardiff. Question for you, did this feel like a France home game?
It very much did. I remember they always used to say that French politicians would canvass in London because so many French people live in London. Well, I think a French politician would have had better luck in Cardiff on the weekend than someone in the upcoming Welsh Senedd election, to be honest, because on Sunday morning there were Frenchmen all over the city in fine voice. This France team really has, we talk about this nebulous concept of hearts and minds. This France team really has captured the hearts and minds of their nation. Their TV figures are sky high at the moment. Both games they've played have had something like 7-8 million viewers back at home, in addition to the huge travelling support. They were not just there on Sunday in Cardiff. The Saturday night I was in the terraces at Cardiff Arms Park. There were more, I was hearing people speaking Welsh, people speaking English, but there was a lot of people speaking French there as well, cheering on a very good under 20s match, to be fair. And there were some green shoots for Wales there in how some of those young Welsh boys fared against a French team, half of whom have top 14 experience this season. It's just literally a different league over there. But certainly now there is not just huge expectation around how this France team perform on the field, but off the field, the nation is fully behind them right now.
I was going to ask if there's one selection that has spiked or swelled the kind of good feeling towards the national team, or is it sort of, because we see these Jalibert, obviously there was a lot of clamour for him to play. Is that a big part of it?
I think so. So I mean, obviously Antoine Dupont is just a god in France. He is a genuine superstar in that country, in the way that we always talk about we need more superstars in Britain. He is a genuine celebrity and superstar in France.
What about Louis Bielbiarré, by the way? He must be getting close.
Louis Bielbiarré, I mean, he's not quite on the catwalk in New York or travelling over to America just yet, but certainly as a rugby player, he is another superstar. The selection of Mathieu Jalibert, and also the fact that he and Dupont, I mean, actually Dupont is the slightly more subdued member of that halfback combination at the moment. It's Jalibert who is, I mean, the speed that he can attack with is just something that very few fly halves in the history of the game have. The way when France manipulate the defence so that they have him coming around at the 13 channel, it's like having your blindside wing coming around. He's got so much pace. So you've got that. You've got the fact that, okay, let's look at the three players that they didn't pick in the squad that were the headline omissions. Gaël Fickou, actually, even at the time, wasn't that big an omission. They've used 6 centres in the first 2 rounds already. They used the Bordeaux centre partnership from the European champions and a Toulouse 20-year-old upcoming superstar off the bench. All 3 of them got injured. So this week they pick a 20-year-old debutant and his 22-year-old Pau teammate, the second best team in the top 14, and then they bring Noah Nene, a 21-year-old 6'4" centre off the bench. So I don't think they're missing Fickou. They didn't pick Gregory Aldrit, which was the next one up. What they done instead? They picked 3 number 8s in the pack, basically. Charles Olivon and Michael Guillard at lock can both play number 8 very effectively. And Anthony Gelonge, who's actually perhaps the least suited to number 8 of the 3 of them, playing at number 8. And then Penaud, obviously the big omission. I still think it was ridiculous that he wasn't in the squad, but what they got instead? Teo Atisogbe, just playing very well out wide. So all those 3 decisions have gone very well for France thus far.
Being able to have Flamand on the bench, who's genuinely World 15 stuff, is... Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good at the moment. We should mention as well, lowest Six Nations attendance ever for Wales. Obviously, the exception, ignoring the COVID period when no one could be there.
Yeah, it's it is difficult for Steve Tandy because he's, as he said yesterday, I can only control the rugby side. He can't get he can get 3.5 million people behind his team, and that's by turning the fortunes around. But that is easier said than done. We've spoken in recent weeks. I think Alex wrote about it in the paper about how England would lose, and Steve Borthwick would say, from the stuff we can see, we're not that far away from winning. Steve Tandy is sort of trying to say the same thing after matches. The difference is they've just conceded 54 points to France, and they've conceded 302 points in 6 games. Like, you're not going to win any rugby games if you're conceding 50 points every week you're playing. So yeah, the Welsh public, the fact it was a Sunday game, people talk about ticket prices, but if Wales were winning, that stadium would have been sold out. And the Scotland game is going to have a bigger crowd this weekend because it's a Saturday. They're already above 60,000 for that. But that Italy game on the final weekend, I think they're not yet above 50,000, so I wouldn't be surprised if the record goes again.
David, round us off in terms of the action for round 2. Ireland, Italy. Ireland with a much-needed win. Could have easily been a different story and potentially been a draw here. But once again, Italy underlining their credentials as a serious side in this championship.
Absolutely. I must say, I felt Ireland were slightly fortunate. But when a team plays with the kind of determination they played to win, that kind of old-fashioned phrase, will to win, they really had a will to win, and they did score 3 tries. So you could argue that they did deserve it for the way they applied themselves to it. But you had a feeling for most of the game that Italy were the better side. They certainly looked more fluent in attack, and they had a vastly superior scrum, which is just an ongoing concern for Ireland. But overall, the thing you take away from it was that it was an Ireland-Italy game that had everybody engaged, that you were watching the second half of that game, and I would say best Ireland-Italy game I've ever seen. And that has to be a great thing for the championship. And I do think when you've had we'll say a substandard performance like Ireland had against France, you go out in the next game and you want to play really well, but chances are you're not going to play really well. But what's absolutely imperative is that you win. And if you win, and it's not overly convincing, you have a starting point, and you're likely to get better in your next game. So my feeling would be that Ireland will probably play quite well, or even very well at Twickenham, and it may not be good enough to win. But I think England are now in the position that Ireland were in after Ireland's game against France, in that England are thinking, okay, what we need to do against Ireland is win. Doesn't matter so much how we win, but if we win, we're back in the game, and we're back thinking that we can still win this championship, or at least go very close.
Razzie Erasmus's prediction that Italy finished second all of a sudden doesn't look too ridiculous. We'll have a quick break there, and then we'll look ahead to all of the action in round 3. Okay, so usually in a Six Nations we would be in a rest weekend. Charlie, what impact, if any, does the fact that we're not and they have to go for a third match in a row have this weekend?
I think it's hugely significant, not least because we'll be absolutely knackered by the end of it.
Justice for the journalists.
Yeah, no. What do you think of Ireland? So Ireland playing England. Say, let's take that game as an example, and how there might be ripple effects from the schedule. Ireland playing their first game on a Thursday. Obviously, have a couple of days extra for rest before England. They then rotate quite a fair bit for Italy and get through that game, and they just all of a sudden, that's a lot more freshness that they have. England, the game at Murrayfield would have taken a lot out of them, and I wonder whether now they feel that they have to rotate a bit, certainly in the back row, given that Ben Earl is a very, very fit man. He crawled over the line for his own try right at the end and looked absolutely spent. I think he topped the tackle count and carried 20 plus times, which is just a huge amount to get through. It'd be interesting to see how England manage Maro Itoje too. He looked like a guy who's had a disrupted preparation for this tournament. All of those things, and then you're thinking about normally in the Six Nations with those rhythms that we're used to. You think, right, just continuity in selection is extra important because you build impetus over the course of a campaign. All of a sudden, you might not have that luxury, and you're going, and there might be sort of more changes to cater for because 3 test matches on the bounce with the intensity in a World Cup. You get that at the knockout rounds. You don't get that in the group stages because there's normally a game where bigger side will be able to rotate. 3 full-blooded ones, that's different. That's very, very arduous.
Well, how do you see Borthwick managing that? He's a coach that we know who isn't knee-jerk. He's very methodical, very thought out in his selections, but there's talk about the centres, there's talk about the back row with the Tom Curry potentially, there's obviously the back 3 with what happens with Henry Arundel, so we could see a bit of movement there.
Yeah, I'll find out hopefully a little bit more later. I'm going to Penny Hill Park, but the obvious way to do that, and actually where England can't necessarily do that, so in the autumn with Baxter and Stewart fit, they could use their sort of props, see their starting props and their starting front row, say as a whole, as a unit, and rotate that and have them, change the order of them, have starters and finishers over the course of the tournament, change that, so make sure everybody's fresh. They don't necessarily have that. Interesting how long Joe Hayes was asked to go at Murrayfield as well. I think Trevor Davison only got 5 minutes or so off the top of my head, but Hayes again run himself into the ground, so that's a tough turnaround for him. I think the key will be to ensure, I would expect at least one change in the starting back row just to reinvigorate that area a little bit, not least because those players just go through so much, and maybe more importantly, they set the tone for how England played.
The selection from an Ireland point of view, I think I've asked this question every single week on the pod so far through the Six Nations, but it's fly half. Again, there's chat about Jack Crowley, the reception he got in Dublin. Potentially we could see a change there, Elgan, in terms of the Ireland fly half position.
Yeah, I believe Peter O'Reilly's already written that Andy Farrell came to Sam Prendergast's defence, saying let's support our players, etc. But the intimation of that piece was that it looks like Jack Crowley will be getting the nod, and it certainly feels like they might get a firmer hand at the tiller with that. That's not to write off Sam Prendergast forever, but right now it does look like Jack just does offer that bit more management of the team and the game, and Ireland did look better in that second half when they did manage to win a game that they were at real risk of losing.
David, how do you see the fly half situation? I mean, it's dominated the rugby landscape in Ireland basically since Johnny Sexton retired. Sam Prendergast, we know all about his talents, but at times I think it looks like that he's maybe losing a bit of confidence at the moment. Jack Crowley there as well. How do you see it in that position?
My starting point is that I was a really big Sam Prendergast fan. When he came into the team, I really liked the way he played. I thought his passing was excellent. I thought his control of the game was good. He kicks the ball very well out of hand. And I must say, I've changed my view now. And Saturday was defining for me in relation to, I just thought, no, Sam, you've got to go away, and if it is confidence, you've got to try and get that confidence back. But he no longer looks any kind of a running threat, which when he came in first, he did. And what he's doing now is taking the ball, pretty flat to the line, fair enough, but he's distributing it without any pace, and he's not moving. He's not challenging the defence in any way, and he's making mistakes, and his place kicking is, not nearly good enough for this level, and we know that his defence is definitely not a strong part of his game. So when Jack Crowley came on Saturday, like everybody else, I'm thinking, yeah, this is good. Jack needs to be there. I think there's no question about who will start 10 at Twickenham. It will be Jack Crowley. And if I'm being honest, I'd be surprised if Sam Prendergast was on the bench.
I suppose the one question I have with the Sam Prendergast thing is to how much is it as well of that he's also playing in a team that are just simply less dominant. I think you're absolutely right, David. There's clearly issues or perhaps some holes in his game, but I think previously that might have been masked by the fact that he had a pack and was playing in a team, or would have been playing in a team, an Ireland team that was so dominant. Just one more, Charlie, on Ireland. How dangerous a prospect are they for England? Because the way we look at this game has changed a little. I think England will still be favourites, won't they, particularly because they're at home, but the way we probably feel about this game is a little different now because of what happened at Murrayfield.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's on England to ensure that they are the fresh scars of this latest Scotland kind of defeat don't bleed into this week, and that's what we hear time and again that Steve Borthwick is excellent at, is refocusing side. And he made sure to sort of make that point in his post-match stuff that, you know, I don't deal in the polarities of opinion. The point he was making was that we do as journalists, but no, they are a side, Ireland, with a lot of players who have experience of beating England. They were good for a lot of that. The last game at Twickenham, when they came so close to winning, and England got out of jail with an excellent attack, it must be said, in the lead up to that Marcus Smith drop goal. But no, it's certainly a dangerous one, and as we said last week, the impetus in a Six Nations works two ways. You know, you get on a roll winning, or you get on a roll where you feel a bit neurotic towards the back end of games, and you can shrink. And England have the experience to resist that, to sort of avoid that happening. But they need to be assertive this week and start well. Certainly, you'd expect.
Yeah, I look at England's 3 games now: Ireland home, Italy away, France away. Great challenge, and they'll lean into that. But 3 really tough games. Wales, Scotland also this weekend. Elgan, I think this was one of those matches that before the Six Nations started, you may have even mentioned this, I might be wrong, so you can correct me if I am there, but that Wales might have had this as the one circled of possibly an opportunity to get a result. Has that changed because of what we've seen in the opening 2 rounds?
I don't think it has changed. My pre-tournament prediction was that Scotland would lose in Rome with a bonus point, beat England at Murrayfield, and then as a result, coming down from that high against a Wales team desperate for a win, that this would be Wales's best chance of winning. So 2/3 of that has come true. Whether the third part comes true, who knows? I will caveat that Wales have been worse in the first 2 rounds than I thought they were going to be pre-tournament. So that has tempered the expectation a bit, but I still think it is comfortably Wales's best chance of a win, because I think whether they win or lose this game on Saturday, you're looking at that Friday night against Ireland, which I don't see a hope there. And then that final game against Italy, if they are, whether they're 1 from 4 or 0 from 4, it feels like, you know, it's a bit after the Lord Mayor's show on the last day. It's trying to avoid possibly a 3rd successive wooden spoon after the 4 games in 5 weeks. Who are Wales going to have fit? They've been okay with fitness thus far, but you don't know what they're going to look like on that final weekend. So this is still penciled in terms of the biggest crowd we're going to have in Cardiff for the 3 home games as well, and the history of the fixture and where it falls in the schedule. It is Wales's best bet to sneak a win this year.
Do you not think they just look miles away from it, though? Really, like, you know, Scotland.
For those of you listening, I just sort of nodded there.
But, you know, it's one thing saying, you know, Scotland, despite a really poor performance in Rome, had the capability of turning it around and beating England. Ireland this weekend, even though they'll go to Twickenham as underdogs, have the capability of winning there. Even the match we're about to come on to, that France going to be massive, heavy favourites, but Italy have shown they're a good team. Have we seen anything from Wales in terms of evidence to suggest that they can get a win in this Six Nations?
They did improve not drastically. They did improve on the Twickenham performance comfortably, because I mean that Twickenham performance was just so insipid that there was no way that they could get worse. So the hope will be that with an extra week, with 80 minutes against this riotous France team, where, you know, there was one stage during the game I looked at Ollie Cracknell and I thought, you know, I was tired just looking at him, at how much the Welsh forwards and the Welsh players were being run around that field. The hope is that they will just improve again with another week. And like I say, we don't know what Scotland will be coming down from this high of what they've just done. It is a fixture. We talked before the England-Scotland game about how for a lot of these England players history doesn't matter anymore, but actually on the day history mattered, and things that go back centuries mattered on that field. Wales-Scotland, there is a history of, you know, you go back to Dan Biggar's line, "Oh, show me all your trophies," or whatever he said. That's paraphrasing what he said a few years ago. On that occasion, Scotland did actually beat them convincingly, but it wasn't Murrayfield. But even the last 2 years, Wales have not been far away from beating Scotland. So that is why they will feel this is our chance to win. If you were just taking away jerseys and history, then Scotland would be comfortable favourites. But sometimes jerseys and histories do matter.
Yeah, I'm prepared to look such a fool there. Because
I'm expecting them to lose, but it's their best chance of winning.
Yeah. No, I get you. What chance do we give Italy against France?
When we spoke about France's potential earlier, I was going to jump in and then didn't. But the other side of the coin of bringing in all these exciting players and maybe being slightly, I was going to say experimental, is a better word, but with a back five that is essentially 5 back rowers and extremely athletic back rowers, is that there are also weaknesses there and potential lapses across the course of 80 minutes. If you've got inexperience in some positions and you've got a potential, not lack of balance, but certainly if you're going one way away from weight towards athleticism. So, and Italy have just shown themselves to be so coordinated and tough as well as in how they've hung in games. Ireland eventually sort of outlasted them in Dublin, but it wasn't without a serious fight from Italy, and not just blood and guts. They also moved the ball well. Their scrum is a phenomenon. It's been awesome to watch.
I think it might be the most dominant Six Nations scrum I've seen in
and over
I can't
80
remember
minutes.
A better one.
And when England made their front row replacements, as we say, they kept Hayes on as long as possible. When Bevan Rodd came on for Ellis Genge, the scrum narrative flipped. So although Scotland were second best for the first hours, they came on strong, and Italy's dominance remained constant throughout. So that's a weapon. So I mean, it's at the point now where I'm just really looking forward to watching Italy again and seeing how they get on, because they're such an exciting side.
Yeah, it's so refreshing, isn't it? It wasn't that long ago that Italy were a little bit where, dare I say it, Wales are at the moment, although I'm still intrigued by Wales-Scotland. But it was always the game every weekend where you thought, we know the result of that. You don't get too excited about it. Whereas all of a sudden, despite the challenge of playing in Paris, David, France, Italy, yes, France will be the heavy favourites, but you look forward to watching this Italian team because, as the boys have been outlining, they have some real strengths.
Absolutely. And the thing that struck me about France against Ireland was that France weren't that interested in scrum domination. They just wanted to win their own ball. It was almost like they had a truce with Ireland. You can have your ball, we'll have our ball. And obviously that suited Ireland greatly, because every Irishman going to Paris thought the scrum was going to be in trouble. And France did pretty much the same at the line-out. Everybody was saying, Ireland's line-out was very good in Paris. But it was good because France didn't compete at lots of line-outs. Now, France are going to have a different attitude against Italy, because the Italian, as Elgan and Charlie have been saying, they've got a great scrum. And they had Ireland in all kinds of trouble in the scrum, and they scrum very well against Scotland. And if France are not careful, their scrum are going to be in trouble. What I mean by not careful is if France don't focus on scrum more than they've had to in their first 2 games, that could be a very interesting area. And the part that's really kind of interesting now is that if Italy get ball, they have the ability and the ambition to move it, and to move it really well. Some of their back play against Ireland was excellent. It didn't always get the reward it deserved. There was one grubber that really should have ended up in an Italian try, but the bounce kind of went Ireland's way. And I can see Italy, making it a real game. I mean, it's interesting that we're now talking about France going into their 3rd game and maybe having their first serious contest. And that coming against Italy, with France playing at home. So you've got to give Italy tremendous credit. I mean, for too long in the Six Nations, we've had 2 games every kind of Six Nations weekend that we look forward to, and a third that we less look forward to and regarded as a foregone conclusion. And that was the game involving Italy. I would have been one of the people saying at that time, and I kind of still believe it should be a meritocracy. Nobody should be guaranteed a place, and that if Georgia's standards were high enough, they should have an opportunity to get themselves into the Six Nations, or one of the other tier 2 countries that are doing really well. There should be a pathway into this fantastic competition. Nobody should be guaranteed it. But Italy are now in a position where, if that ever did come to pass, and I don't believe for a second it would, but if it ever did come to pass, I don't think it would be Italy that would be losing its place.
Yeah, funny how those conversations are very, very quiet now, aren't they? It's no longer Italy at the bottom. Couple of emails just to finish off. Paul and Ryan got in touch with us. The email address is theruck@thetimes.co.uk. Now, Paul got in touch with a brilliantly detailed email around this narrative that Scotland have never been close to winning the Six Nations, and he was saying and outlined the games and the points and the bonus points and all that sort of thing, that they almost won it in 2021. Elgan, to which you pointed out very, very quickly,
the Grand Jam that Wales almost won. But Wales, despite the fact that they lost the performance which was their best in the final game against France, they did sneak the championship in the end. And
that was
look where we are now.
Exactly. It was the brilliant Lewis Rees-Zammit try that beat Scotland. Is a really, really good game that could have gone either way, and then maybe who knows for Scotland. Yeah, it was the series of no crowd red cards. Peter O'Mahony, was it Xander Ferguson? Then the 40-24 win over England, where Dan Biggar was allowed to take a penalty quickly, and there was the possible knock on from Lewis Rees-Zammit off his knee that wasn't given on. No, it was Nick Tompkins, I think it was. And then finally, when they actually played really well in Paris, they decided to lose that one. So there we are. Yeah, well, Paul, thank you for your email. Although I would say as well, we are still a little bit talking about ifs, buts and maybes rather than the reality of where Scotland have been, but really appreciate you getting in touch. And then Ryan said an email, said, welcome Charlie, he enjoyed your first piece last week about Ollie Chesham, England building some quality depth in the second row. His question is, when George Martin is back, how do you feel England approach the 5 jersey, assuming Marrow will be wearing 4 whenever fit and available? I'd still feel Martin is our biggest scrummaging lock. So is it horses for courses, i.e. Martin for France or South Africa, with maybe Chesham to 6? What do you reckon?
Possibility. Chesham has been less and less frequently at 6, even for Leicester, so that's an interesting one. They rate George Martin so highly. You can tell by the fact that he's one of the guys that's holding one of the central contracts, the enhanced EPS contracts, sorry. So yeah, clearly I'm not sure whether that will mean that Martin is and the thing is, it feels like a long way away to say that he can be a surefire starter. I think he needs to certainly string together some games for Leicester and indeed Saracens when he moves there. But the return of Martin will just ensure that they have that extra profile of out and out heavy locks. But maybe, talking about how France are playing, maybe that profile of lock is sort of becoming more outdated. Although having said that, I think that the return of Martin will make sure that their scrum can be a weapon against everybody. His ceiling's really high, isn't it? It's the form and fitness is the concern at the moment. Absolutely, about George Martin. Yeah, absolutely. They probably want a bit more out of him, sort of carrying and stuff like that. But I think that can come. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to leave it there for this Monday episode. David, brilliant to have you on. Really appreciate your time. When are we next going to be seeing you at a Six Nations game? Are you at Twickenham this weekend for the Ireland match?
Yes, I'm at Twickenham on Saturday. And if I can tell you about how long I've been going to Twickenham watching Ireland, I was thinking about this. What was the first time you were at Twickenham? How could I forget it? 1978. And I reckon it was the most miserable 3 days of my life. I'll tell you, I just graduated from university. And my older brother, Brendan, decided that because you've graduated from college, first member of the family, whoever went to university, I'm going to bring you to Cheltenham. And then you're going to go from Cheltenham to Twickenham on the Saturday. And it was a huge deal in my life. I mean, I was, I suppose, like 20 years of age at the time or something like that, or 21 maybe. And I go to Cheltenham. First 2 days, great. I wake up on the Thursday morning and it's announced on the news that the Gold Cup day has been called off because of snow. I'm staying in Stratford-on-Avon in a hotel. I look out and there isn't one flake of snow anywhere to be seen, but Cheltenham was called off. So the following day was St. Patrick's Day. We go to London and we prepare for the Ireland-England game. And it was the most miserable game I'd say ever played at Twickenham between Ireland and England. Something like 15-9 or 15-6. A game that England were always winning and Ireland were absolutely hopeless. So it started the way it was going to continue for a long time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Twickenham this weekend.
Sorry, can we just re-record the entire podcast talking about the 1978 Five Nations?
I saw you getting excited there.
That was the final Grand Slam of Wales' 70s. I wasn't alive at the time, but 27 years later, I was there in 05 when it happened again. I will be in Lille this weekend for France, Italy. Very much looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Next podcast for you coming on Thursday. We'll be at the England training base building up to that match against Ireland, and then the usual fare for you Saturday night, the pod after the game between England and Ireland. Also, just a reminder, Monday the 9th of March is our Ruck Live at the Twickenham Stoop. Serge Betson and Courtney Laws are going to be in attendance. Go to thetimes.com/events to get your ticket. Thank you very much for listening. This has been The Ruck, the journalists' rugby podcast from The Times and The Sunday Times.